Let's talk about podcasting. This is a program that was originally delivered at the Senior Center in the city of Carlsbad back in October of 2022. Let's discuss really what a podcast is all about. If you had an audio book that married a magazine, its offspring might be a podcast. So podcasts are audio files. These are digital files that are downloaded off the internet. And they are published periodically. So like a magazine, some are published every day, some once a week, and so on. Most of them are available for free, and if they are for free, often they will have limited advertising in, kind of like a radio broadcast would, but it's much less advertising load than a typical radio program. And many of the podcasts offer a premium version where you pay a few bucks and it would remove the ads and give you fancier features in terms of the podcast controls, for example. Why would you bother to listen to one? Well, it's mainly convenience. The fact that you download these podcasts to a mobile device, for example, like a smartphone or a tablet, you can listen wherever and whenever you'd like. So once you have the podcast downloaded, you can be out for an exercise walk and enjoying a podcast, catching up on whatever topic is of interest to you. Another great reason is because there's a wide variety of topics. There are tens of thousands of podcasts available now, and we'll talk in a minute about how you would find some. They follow these kinds of categories: news and current events, and just about any hobby you can think of will have one or more podcasts focused on it. Entertainment, certainly, technology, meditation and relaxation, and sleep aids, those things are all found in the podcast world. How do you find them? Well, first of all, you need to get a software app on your device. So I'm going to do a demonstration later about the app that comes standard on an Apple iPhone or iPad. But there are many different podcast apps that can be used to download podcasts. So you think about the universe of podcasts, you use an app that you either get for free, like the one that comes built in on your phone, or one that has fancier features that you might pay for. That's how you find and download the podcasts, and then also you use that app to play back the device, to hit play, back up, pause, that kind of stuff. When you go into a podcast directory and you look for a particular podcast to listen to, subscribing is a good idea. You can listen to them individually, but maybe better, if you think you're going to like it, to subscribe to the podcast, and that way you can set that such that it will be downloading those episodes automatically whenever they are published. Now, understand that most people do download podcasts to their device, meaning they have it on the device, much as if they might have music or something on the device, and they don't need internet access to enjoy them. So if you plan to be out of the range of your cellular data coverage, or you're not on Wi-Fi, you want to have your podcast downloaded. There is an option to listen to them in a streaming fashion, whereby it's played to you over the internet, but again, that will require internet access for all of the time that you're listening to the podcast. The podcast files are not particularly large, so I recommend downloading them. If you get tired of a podcast, you just unsubscribe. After you've listened to a particular episode, often you just delete that episode, so you minimize the impact of space being taken up on your device. How do you decide which of the many apps to use? Well, I think asking friends for advice is a great way. Picking one where you can get help understanding and how to use that app. So I'm going to do a demonstration with the podcast app that comes standard on an Apple iPhone or iPad, and that has the benefit of being free because you've already paid for it essentially when you paid for the Apple device. And there's a lot of help available because it's very many copies out there on all the iPhones. A lot of YouTube creators have done video tutorials on it. In fact, you're going to see one here in a minute. And you could go to an Apple store to get help with it. You can look in the user manual that comes with the device to get help with it. Understand that you're not bound to use that podcast app that came with your device. You can experiment with others, and that's why you would ask friends for advice. So, and the other aspect is you might consider paying a few bucks to get premium features. Quite often, when you download the app, you can pay a small amount, like a few dollars in some cases. More and more of them are going to a subscription model where they'll ask you for a small amount every month. But even that might be worth it to you just to have nicer features, and it usually removes all the advertising that's in the podcast, so that's a big plus. You use the podcast app on the phone. You're going to see this in a minute. One of the nice features is when you stop listening, the next time you fire up your podcast app, you pick up right where you left off. Okay, so that's kind of nice. You can adjust the playback speed, so you can have the playback go a little faster, like I'm talking more quickly right now, or you can ask it to slow down a little bit. And in either case, the pitch of the speaker is pitch corrected, as they say. So when you speed up the playback on a podcast, it does not turn into the chipmunk sound. It still sounds like a regular person, only they're speaking more quickly. And that's a real plus. On some of the podcasts, you might play it 25 or 50% faster than normal, and that allows you to get through the material more quickly. Most apps have a quick way to go forward or back a certain increment of time, like 15 seconds forward or back, or 30 seconds. Most of the apps have sleep timers, and this is kind of handy if you're listening to a podcast and it's helping you to go to sleep. Having the sleep timer set so that it goes off after a particular amount of time and doesn't keep going and going and going after you've fallen asleep, thereby losing your place. Speaking of losing your place, unlike most audiobooks, podcasts don't have, at least the ones I've listened to, they don't really have a bookmarking feature. So ebooks, electronic books, and audiobooks, which are electronic audio files, audiobooks, they often have bookmarking features, but I've not really found that in the podcast world. You could also use a smart speaker, so your Amazon Echo or your Google Home device or Apple Home device, smart speakers can be used to playback podcasts. Also, many of the music streaming services that have come around to stream music mostly, now they're adding podcasting to the variety of their offerings. So Spotify, Amazon Music, those are all music streaming services, but now they're not just music. They often include podcasts, which is kind of nice. Let's talk about which podcast app you might consider using. If you're an Apple user, I think you might start with the podcast app that's built in. It's free. You can get a lot of help with it because lots and lots of people out there using it. If you get some advice from friends suggesting a different one, I'm going to suggest you consider one called Overcast. It has fancier features. I think it's just a little nicer looking app to handle the podcasts. But the bottom line is that you'll have a lot of choices, and you might consider paying a few dollars, as I mentioned before, to strip out the advertising and maybe give you some fancier features. In the Android world, Stitcher and Google Podcasts and Beyond Pod, those are some of the major names in podcast apps in the Android world, so you might consider those. Now, the other part about getting started with podcasting is to know what to listen to. Again, your friends will be a great help. Presumably, your friends have similar interests to you and they might recommend something. But let me just give you a few to get you started. If you like technology, like I do, there are a couple that you might start with right at the top. Ask the Tech Guys, featuring Leo Laporte. It's all about tech topics, people calling in with tech questions. There's another one called Rich on Tech. In fact, that's exactly the same kind of thing. NPR, National Public Radio, the programs you hear on NPR, for example, Fresh Air, just about every one of those programs will have a podcast. So if you like listening to something special on NPR, check to see in your podcast directory if that program is available via podcast. And that means you don't have to remember to turn the radio on at a particular time. You can just download the podcast and listen to it at your convenience. Everyday Positivity is a motivational podcast. Kind of cool. It's probably no more than 3 or 4 minutes each time. It's a daily podcast. TED Talks, we know about TED Talks. And as you know, the topics on a TED Talk program are quite varied. NPR has another one called Planet Money that I enjoy, kind of about applied economics and behavioral economics. So a couple on science topics. 60-second science, as you might gather, a short 1-minute blurb on something of scientific interest, or Hidden Brain. Hidden Brain is more like a 30-minute one, again on science topics, both very good. The Truth, Snap Judgment, This American Life, these are all quite often fiction storytelling. Okay, and there are quite a few podcasts that are crime related, hard to solve crimes, or somebody falsely imprisoned and an investigation as to why they were found guilty when in fact they're innocent. Those kinds of things are quite popular, so you could always search for the crime as a prompt in your searching if you'd like. But The Truth, Snap Judgment, I've found are focused on a whole variety of different topics, and I find them very well produced. This American Life, also a National Public Radio kind of thing, magazine style. KPBS Roundtable. This KPBS is the local San Diego public television broadcasting. And they have a program where they get the editors of the local newspapers around a table, and for 30 minutes they discuss the news of the week. So it's sort of a guided discussion on topics of newsworthiness in the past week. Coffee Break French, as you might gather, help you learn French. Awesome Etiquette, a show all about manners, good manners and bad manners. And Splendid Table is a cooking show, very popular. Okay. Now you're going to see a demonstration. I'm going to be using my iPhone 6s, which happened to be running at that time iOS version 15.6.1. And it does happen to be Apple's standard podcast app built in, and that's the logo, the purple logo. Okay. The Overcast app is one that I like better than the Apple app, and unfortunately today we will not have time to do a demonstration of Overcast. You could go do a Google search on the Overcast app, and I'm sure you'll find someone out there that's done some kind of video tutorial on it. Okay, so I hope that gets you started. I hope that gets you your appetite piqued a little bit for learning more and actually getting an app and starting to download podcasting and see how you like it. So from now on, it's all going to be about the demonstration of the Apple iPhone podcasting app. Stay tuned. Let's look at the podcast app that's built into all Apple iPhones and iPads. The icon for it is in the upper left corner, the purple one. I'm going to tap it to open. It opens with this screen. I want you to draw your attention to the bottom of the screen where there are 4 icons. The first one says Listen Now, and it's illuminated in purple, and that's why we're seeing this screen. But there are 3 other screens, and I really want to start with the library screen, which is the second from the right. And I think that's the best way to understand how the podcast app works. So I'm going to tap on the library app. You see it's illuminated in purple now. So we see a list of things in the library view. The first thing is shows. And a show is the word that Apple has chosen to use for podcasts. That might be confusing, but that's just the way it is, and it'll be quite obvious what it is here in a second. And then you see some other category, saved, downloaded, and latest episodes. If we scroll up, there's more on this screen as well. But let me go ahead and tap on the word shows and let's go to that screen. So now we're in the shows page of the podcast library of the Apple Podcast app. These are the 3 podcasts that I'm subscribed to in the app. The first one, 60-Second Science, the second one, Fresh Air, and the third one,
This American Life. Okay? Those are the only 3 podcasts that I'm currently subscribed to on this app. Now, let's tap the first one, 60 Second Science. And you'll see that the screen comes up with the logo for the podcast and the title. There's a button there that says the latest episode with the play symbol, the triangle pointing right. If I tap that, it will start playing the latest episode. And it's starting to tell me what episodes are out there. So it says here that on Tuesday they announced one that's Halloween oriented, and the previous Friday of last week they had something about hawks, and back on October 14th they talked about taking naps, and on the 11th they talked about the pandemic. You'll notice that there's a purple play symbol and the notation about the duration. In other words, I could tap on the one here that's underneath the naps podcast and start listening to it, and it's going to tell me that it's going to run for 5 minutes. Okay, so it's going to be about a minute and a half, 2 minutes worth of information, and the rest is going to be kind of the beginning and the end of the podcast, along with probably promotions for other podcasts and or general advertising. So let's go back up. Just wanted you to see basically what we're talking about here, okay? Now, in the upper right corner, there's a gray circle with 3 dots. Let's tap that. And this is information about this particular podcast. The first one says unfollow the show. Now, unfollow is a funny word. It comes from the social media world. It should say unsubscribe. Okay, that's the term that most podcasters use. If I wanted to unsubscribe for this 60-second podcast, I could do it here. There's also settings and a few other things to look at, but in the interest of brevity, I'm going to go right to settings. And I want to show you that you have some control about settings particular to this podcast. So it's quite nice. You can have different settings and preferences for different podcast subscriptions. So it's presenting the episodes newest to oldest, meaning the freshest episode is going to be at the top of the list. We saw that. It's a Halloween related. We can hide any episode that's already been played so that it kind of gets out of our way. We can automatically download or not episodes. So whenever the phone is connected to the internet and the phone's turned on, the podcast app can be looking for new episodes for you and automatically downloading those to the podcast app. That's quite a nice feature. And the last one here is to remove played downloads. So not only can you hide anything that's been played, but you could actually remove it from your device. When you download a podcast, it does take a little bit of space on your phone or tablet, but a very small amount. So I would not be concerned about that. Okay? So let's go back to the top. In the upper right, I'm going to click Done to get out of this screen. And then I'm going to tap in the upper left corner to go back a page. Okay, so once again, these are the 3 that I'm subscribed to. You'll notice above the 4 icons at the bottom, there's a bar that shows the logo of one of these podcasts, the Fresh Air podcast, and I'm partway through that. So if I tap that, it's going to bring that up full screen, and I have some interesting things that I can do here. The most obvious one is at the top you see the logo, so you know what you're listening to. It's hard to see, but right below that there's a line with time markers on it, and the time marker shows you whereabouts in the podcast you are. Okay, so in this case it's very hard to see, but I'm 13 seconds into the podcast, and the podcast goes on 48 minutes. Okay, so quite long. The title is scrolling there. And I have some controls here. I have the play button in black, again pointing right, and I have 2 small circles. One is a circle going backwards with the number 15 in it, and the other is a circle going forwards with the number 30 in it. That's to back up 15 seconds on the left, or to go ahead 30 seconds. We have choices of the speed of playback. In other words, if we can keep up with it, sometimes it's nice to make the podcast playback faster so that you get through it more quickly. So you have a number of choices here, 1 1/4, 1 1/2, or 2 times. So if you hit 2 times, it's really going to sound like bop, 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 bop. You can still discern what they're saying, but maybe 2x is too fast for you, and you want to go back to, you can even slow it down. Right now we see 1/2x. So if the standard speed of a podcast is too quick, then you can slow them down. Most people leave it in 1x, and that's probably the best place to start. Okay, let's see what the 3 dots do on the far right bottom corner. I have some choices that come up about sharing this podcast, which would allow me to send a text message or an email with a link to the podcast to maybe somebody that you think might enjoy this episode. Remove the download and or play the next episode. So let me close that now. And I'm going to swipe from the top down to dismiss this panel. Now, one of the most important parts about podcasting is deciding which podcast to listen to. And usually if you are asking your friends or reading about them in publications that review podcasts, you decide you want to try one. And the best way to do that is to try to find it in the directory. So let's draw our attention back down to the bottom right corner where the magnifying glass is. That's the search icon. Let me tap that now. So now the search screen comes up. Right below the word search is the field for putting in the word or words that start the search. So I happen to know that there's a particular podcast that I want to look for now. Before I show you that, right below it is something that's very easy to overlook. You see all podcasts on the left and your library on the right. And whichever one you tap is the one that's got a brighter background of white. And that's the one selected. I suggest you always be in the all podcast category, the one on the left. So it's going to search all the hundreds of thousands of podcasts that are available through the Apple Podcast directory and see if you can find it. If you tap the one on the right, it's only going to search the podcasts that are in your little world, probably just the ones that you are subscribed to. And more than likely, you don't need help finding those, okay? So let's make sure that all podcast is selected. Now, there are a couple of different podcasts that I've recommended in the handout. One is called Rich on Tech, and Rich on Tech is a podcast made from a gentleman that works in the Los Angeles television market, and Rich does tech episodes, tech spots, if you will, on KTLA Channel 5. And he also does podcasting and a lot of other things. So I'm going to start typing in Rich on Tech, and let's see if it comes up. I'm going to type, whoops, I typed T instead, R-I-C-H. I misspelled it already. And you start to see the answers to the search criteria. And sure enough, Rich on Tech comes up. So let's go ahead and say Rich on Tech. Now understand, I must be connected to the internet. It's using an internet search to go find all this stuff. So if I'm in airplane mode, I'm going to have real trouble with this. You need to be connected to the internet. That's either Wi-Fi in your home or at a coffee shop, or it's cellular data when you're paying for that through your cellular provider like AT&T, T-Mobile, Consumer Cellular, whatever it is. These are the answers that come up, and sure enough, Rich on Tech is the first one. Other ones that seem to sound similar might be here, but I'm going to tap on Rich on Tech. Okay. Now, it's giving me a hint here with the plus sign. It says follow shows to get notified about new episodes and to get automatic downloads. So I can hit the plus sign and kind of follow up on that. I'm just going to dismiss that notification here for a second. this is what normally comes up, okay? It's going to be the logo for the podcast. It's going to say it's Rich DeMuro. It's on KTLA. I could tap that to immediately listen to the most recent episode. I could hit the More button here in the center, and it could give me a description about the podcast, so I know a little bit more before I jump in. Now, one thing I can do is I can come down and I can look at all the different episodes, okay? And again, these are listed as the most recent one at the top. So here he's talking about the new Pixel Watch from Google and Pixel 7 phones, okay? Now, again, I could hit the play icon in purple there. It tells me it'll be a 54-minute episode, and I can start playing it, okay? Again, for purposes of this tutorial video, if you will, I'm going to kind of skip some of those steps, but naturally you would probably pick one of those episodes of interest. If you kind of think that this is something that you want to subscribe to, then we're going to probably, let's look up at that top, and there's that plus sign, and there are also 3 dots. So we know from the last time we did this, if we press the 3 dots, we have certain choices we can do. One is to follow the show, which again really means to subscribe to the show, and then some other choices. So I'm going to tap follow the show. And it confirms that I am now following the Rich on Tech podcast. Again, what that really means is I have subscribed to the Rich on Tech podcast. Okay, so let's back up. I'm in the upper left corner. Let's go ahead and cancel from the search. I could search for other things. Notice I searched for something specific because somebody recommended I try that podcast. But you can go through different categories. News, for example, health and fitness, comedy. You can go into those and start to basically browse around to see something that you might be interested in. Okay, so you have quite a few here, and at your leisure you can kind of browse through those. Let's go back and tap back on the lower right bar. The second from the right is the library icon. Let's back up and go to the library. And now let's see, now we have 4 shows, look at that. Now, sure enough, Rich on Tech shows up as a show that we are following, i.e. that we are subscribed to. Okay, so that's the process of finding it. Again, the best way to get a hint on what you might like is no different than if you ask people for recommendations on books or magazines to read. And then use the search icon in the bottom right in your whatever podcast app you're using and search for that podcast literally by the words in the title as much as you know about it, okay? I think that's a lot easier than trying to find a category and browse through hundreds, if not more, choices in a given category. I want to draw your attention to the second from the left icon in the bottom. It's called Browse. And this might appeal to you if you are interested in just getting suggestions. In other words, they put up different podcasts that they think might be of interest to people. I'm swiping with my finger right to left to look at more and more. Okay? If you're a podcast creator, you'd be delighted to have your podcast featured in this browse category. And these are going to change often. Okay? So don't expect the same thing to be showing up every time. And now I've sort of canceled our recording here. Again, that's the world of browsing. And let's go back to the library. Okay. Now, we are in the shows screen of the library. To get to the full library, let's tap in the upper left corner on the word. Now, shows, we've been in there, right? Saved, let's tap on that. It says here there are no saved episodes. So there are 2 ways to listen to podcasts. One is to download them to your device and then listen to them on the device. No different than if you downloaded an audiobook or a piece of music. The beauty of that is you do not need to be on the internet. Okay, so you can be in airplane mode, no internet, and you can be listening to your music or your audiobooks or your podcast. That's the beauty of downloading them. However, some people say, no, I've always got my internet going. I'm going to listen to it streaming. In other words, just play it for me and I'll listen to it. Well, if you choose the streaming approach, you can start listening to it, and I'm guessing, I don't really do streaming, I always download my podcasts, but you would be able to save something as you're streaming it, probably as a way of making a note that you can come back to it. Okay, so I'll let you investigate what the saved category is all about. I don't have a lot of experience in it because I just download the episodes that I'm interested in. Now, if I tap on the word downloaded here, sure enough, we're going to see the episodes that have been downloaded. And they're going to be in the various categories. So the first one, we've got, 5 or 6 in the fresh air category. Fresh air is a broadcast that runs in public radio. Rich on Tech, that's the first episode. We just saw that. That's a fresh subscription for us. And then we're going to start seeing others. Probably depends on how many you have. You notice it's been downloading Fresh Air podcasts for quite a while. I haven't been in this app for quite a while, so I'm going to spare us all of this agony. But whatever episodes you have downloaded, they'll appear here in order of when they were downloaded. So I'm going to back up. We don't need to go walking back through podcast history here. They have a convenient category called Latest Episodes. So here you're going to see the latest episodes from the podcasts that you are subscribed to. Again, if you tap any one of them, they will start to play. So again, let's back up. We're in the library view. Now we've talked about 3 of the 4 icons on the bottom of the screen. The fourth one that we have not talked about, that is the one that's probably going to be chosen when you first open the podcast app, is to listen now. And that's going to basically say, I'm opening the podcast app and I want to carry on with what I've been listening to. So this is going to queue up your subscribed to podcasts, and it'll show you right there. And you can tap one and go into that as a convenience. It's also, of course, going to start suggesting things that are similar to what you've subscribed to, okay? So the podcast world is hungry for listeners. The more subscribers you have to your podcast, the more popular you are, obviously. And sadly, they're starting to add advertising to these podcasts. So if you have lots and lots of subscribers, you can demand higher revenue fees from advertisers. Now, it's not nearly as bad as the load you would hear if you listen to a program on AM radio. Okay, so yes, there are ads most of the time, but no, it's not nearly as bad as an AM radio broadcast. Okay, there are other things to be discovered about podcasts, which maybe we'll cover in a subsequent tutorial. Again, let's go back to the library view as the kind of place we started, and let's finish with this. Certainly hope that this has been helpful, and I certainly hope that the world of podcasting turns out to be a very rewarding one for you. Thanks for watching.